I think what I always feel like with human design, the information it gives us isn't actually very mystical in nature. It's very specific guidance around how we can show up in a way that feels more authentic and aligned in our lives, and around decision making and strengths and challenges and all those things. So it is this interesting confluence that I think is really compelling.
Let's make it real for people, relationship or marriage or whatever. What does that look like on a daily basis? Where do you have to kind of give me grace? Where do I need to give you grace when it comes to regular, everyday relationship stuff?
One story I tell in the book is of a father who I sat with. He was like, Erin, I'm so frustrated with my daughter. And I looked up her design. I was like, she's kind of doing it perfectly. Like, and so what he perceived as flakiness was just her honoring her need for variety.
If you've heard the term human design, but you have no idea what that is or why so many people swear by it, this episode is for you. I'm sitting down with human design expert and author Erin Claire Jones to explore what human design actually is in a real world way, how it works, and why it can be a game changer for you in how you live, work, and relate. I literally asked her to show me how it matters in real life, not just in theory. How can understanding our human design type help us to resolve conflict? And why do so many people burn out doing what other people thrive in? We also pull up my chart and we walk through it step by step so you can see exactly how the human design system works. My guess is by the time we're halfway through the episode, you're probably going to want to pause and look up your own human design chart. And even if you already know your human design, by the end, you're going to have a much better understanding of the real world considerations around human design and how to make decisions with more clarity and confidence, how to work with your energy, whatever it is, instead of forcing things. And you're going to understand how to improve the way that you lead, love, and collaborate. So whether you're brand new to human design or you're just curious what all the buzz is about, this is the perfect human design conversation to get you started. I put timestamps in the description below if you want to jump around. You and I were on a group trip almost 10 years ago to
Oh my
Israel,
God.
which was an incredible experience. It was really the only time I've been to Israel, but I really fell in love with the place. And I've been in touch with a lot of people from that trip, and we've gotten a chance to see how all of us have sort of evolved. And I can't remember, were you doing the human design back then?
So I had discovered human design, I think like 8 months before. So I
Okay.
was doing it. I had my like first teacher and business partner, but it was so nascent and so early on.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I always like to start from the beginning. Tell me a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up and what was going on in your household that would have maybe given us a clue of where things were going to go for you, for
Mm,
that pivotal moment when you were 24, 25, when you met the guy that introduced you to human design.
mm. Yeah. So I grew up in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest. I was convinced growing up that I lived in the best place in the whole world. I think that it is such a special part of the country. And I had an older sister. And I grew up, I would say the thing that comes up the most, I'm very close with my parents now. I was then too. But my parents had one was a doctor, one was a lawyer. They had pursued pretty kind of traditional paths according to what their parents wanted them to do. And they were very different than where they'd come from, but that was where they ended up. And I was always just drawn to like pretty weird things when I was young, at least weird according to my parents. Like I remember in high school, like seeking out the Shambhala Center in Seattle and like going to these meditations. And like my parents were like, "What is Shambhala?" I was like, "I don't know, but I must like go find it, you know?" And I wanted to go on all kinds of like, weird adventures and trips that they just supported me in doing. I remember like backpacking for 6 weeks and they supported me in doing it in Cambodia when I was like a sophomore in high school, and I just wanted to like go spend the summer there. So I think what I love so much about my childhood is that my parents like never made me feel like what I was choosing was wrong or was weird or was different. Like they were very much like, you are so convicted in that thing. So like we are going to support you in doing that thing. And so I think that so much of human design, which we'll talk about, is about giving people permission to be who they are. And I feel like my parents just did it. and they just like supported me in doing it. And so I think that why it feels relevant is that after I graduated from college, I was watching so many friends going to these like pretty, I consulting or these various things. And I think that I always felt some permission to do it differently. And that came from them.
I've kind of had a similar experience. My dad was a lawyer and my mom was a housewife, but I grew up in a very stable environment in middle America. And I think there may be a correlation between kids feeling stable and safe and being giving
Mm,
kind of having that inherent permission to go and explore non-conventional things, because I certainly did a lot of that. Although I have to also say I have three brothers, and they were a little bit more traditional in the way that they
yeah.
approach life. So maybe I'm just making it up. I don't know.
I mean, but I think it also feels true that like I think when we feel safe and secure and can like really think about what we're drawn to, then that's going to look really different,
Hmm.
And I think, but I'm curious, like, do you feel like you were drawn to less conventional things from the outside, or do you feel like that came alive more later in life?
I think I've always had it, honestly. I
Yeah.
remember sitting in church and listening because my mom was really heavy into going to church and listening to whatever they were talking about in church. And it just didn't really, I had so many questions. Like, how does this even work? Like, somebody walked on water? Like, and then you telling me he didn't have a real father. His dad was God. And he looked white, but he's from the Middle East. Like, how does this work? And so I've always had those questions. And in
Yeah.
fact, when I was around 24, 25, I was living in New York City and I came across this book, Conversations with God, which I don't know if you read it or not, but it
A long time ago.
it gave me a lot of answers to some of those questions that I had been incubating for 20 years. So
Mm.
so anyway, after college, you work in you at a tech startup, right?
Yeah. So after college, I basically during college, I ended up studying entrepreneurship. I studied
Mhm.
impact driven entrepreneurship and interviewed 90 entrepreneurs and wrote a thesis on it. And so when I moved to New York City, I looked for working at an actual startup and I joined a fintech startup, a financial technology one for those unfamiliar with that term. And it was a pretty wild experience, and I think it was a really great starting place for me. But I think what was interesting for me about the experience is that I found myself like way more interested in like the people at the company than like all the things we were doing. Like I feel like I was so much more interested in like why aren't we working together more effectively? And like I love the people here, but like nobody really seems to understand each other. And I kind of became the person that everybody vented to. And it I think the like interpersonal dynamics and I guess the ineffectiveness of some of those dynamics, I think just became really interesting to me.
Aside from that, were you into astrology or any kind of zodiac or Briggs Myers? Were you into any kind of like labeling or categorizing systems that help people make decisions in life?
I was not, I was definitely into mystical things. I think I was like, doing my like Reiki training and I was into like all these other things and tarot but I was not into, there was never like a mystical personality or there was never honestly any personality assessment that I had landed on. People assume that I'm like so into astrology because I do human design, but I was never that into astrology.
What was your impression of those kinds of things before human design? Before
I
that
think,
night you had that conversation with that guy.
yeah, I think that I found them really interesting. But I also, I guess I didn't really feel drawn to diving into them deeper,
Mhm.
and I don't quite know why. I think that people were always so fascinating to me in all forms. And so any way of understanding them was interesting. But I think that I was like, these are super cool. But like, I didn't really feel a tug.
Mhm. All right.
Yeah.
So take us to that fateful night that I keep referring to.
So it was 2015. I was 25 years old. And I walked into a friend's gathering, a friend who you probably know, Allie Hoffman.
Mhm.
And I sat next to a stranger at that party who asked to read my human design chart. And I had never heard of human design, but I was like, tell me everything you see about me because I felt like I was at this transitional moment and I wanted insight. And he proceeded to give me the most insightful reading I'd ever received, but it was also very confronting because he really offered a way of doing business and life and friendship that was very far away than from what I'd been choosing. And he actually ended that conversation. I obviously talk about this in the book by saying, Erin, I think you're meant to do this. I think you're meant to study human design and share it. And I want to be your first teacher. I want to build a business with you. So that was how it all started for me. And it is funny, even you mentioning, like, were you interested in these other systems? Like, I was so blown away by human design in that moment. But I don't think there was a part of me that was like, I'm going to go study this thing and share it with the world. Like, it wasn't in my concept catalog of like, that's the thing I'm allowed to do. And it was that invitation, which is so much of what my personal design is about, that really sparked, that's okay. I can go learn and see what happens from there.
I know it may be hard to remember this because it was 10 years ago, but was this, was Allie's gathering something that you know, how people say, oh, I didn't want to go out that night, but I went out anyway. And that's when I met my soulmate and all of these kinds of things. Was there anything
Yeah.
like that surrounding the occasion? Or do you
Like a
remember that?
resistance. I
Or do you
don't,
remember it being, like, is there any indication this was going to be a special night for you? Because this was a big pivot in your
isn't
life.
that so? Yeah. And it is so funny, like looking back now and being like, what if I hadn't gone? Like, where would, it's just crazy. I don't remember any particular like resistance or knowing. I think that like I was definitely in a moment of like just like wanting to experience New York City in all the ways. So I think I was probably saying yes to anything and everything. But no, I don't. I'd be curious. Like, I'd be curious to even go back to text messages and journals around that time to see like what was really happening. Because obviously, going there changed the course of my life in a really profound way.
And who is this guy? Because I mean, look, again, you're 25, you're in a
Yeah,
situationship. Was he hitting
yeah,
on you? Was he? What did he really mean that he wanted to collaborate with you? Like that sounds very. It's a very
yeah.
casual environment to like try to marry somebody in business wise
I know,
after meeting him
totally.
for 30
Again, looking
minutes.
back, yeah, it's so true. I think that his name is Richard, and it's interesting. Like, I don't, it didn't feel romantic. But it did feel like there was a chemistry. Like, I definitely felt that too, where it was like, oh, we're like really like vibing in terms of creatively. I was 25, he was 50. So we were also at very
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
moments and phases in our life. So, but I do think what was interesting, I definitely felt a pull because I like love the things that he was sharing. I felt like he was so insightful, but also so much of his human design is around kind of trusting this like instinctual gut response. And so
Mm-hmm.
for him, he just had this like immediate like we have to like build and create a thing together, which felt really inexplicable. But I also think there was a part of him that observed our particular human designs and they felt very compatible in ways that he'd been looking for. So I do think that also played a role where he was like, oh, she's got these gifts that I don't have and I have these things she doesn't have, and like together we can like create all this stuff. So I think that that did play a role too. And I will say that as wild as the invitation was, it was not a thing that I said yes to immediately. And he lived in LA at the time and I went to LA. I was scheduled to go there like a week later. And it took some time, but I think once he really started to reveal to me all the ways in which human design was not only useful on an individual level, but really to help teams become more effective, to really understand our partners better, our kids better, our friends better. That's when it really started to land in a
Mm-hmm.
way where I was like, oh God, people need this. Imagine if we really understand people on a deeper level. And like, this just felt like such an amazing way to do it.
Also, you're living in New York City, right? New York City is expensive, and
Yeah.
you got to pay for your life some way. So, was there an indication of how you could monetize human design back then and make that work? Because you were thinking about leaving your job anyway, right? And moving to
I
Bali and all
know.
this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm
I
just
mean,
asking you these questions because I know
no, it's a great question.
a lot of
Yeah.
people wonder these things, but then nobody really talks about the financial considerations and whatever other practical considerations need to happen. So I'd love to just hear more about like how the universe provided, if that was the case at all, or just how
Yeah.
the whole thing went down.
No, it's a great question. I think that by the time that I met him, I was consulting for a number of different startups and I had left that other job and I was enjoying it. It was fine, but it wasn't like, oh my God, Erin, I found my thing. I'm like so aligned, but I was like, this is interesting. I think when I discovered human design, I was idealistic in that, like, I felt like so many of my friends had these like had raised venture, had like were entrepreneurs in that way. And I was like, we wouldn't need to raise money. Like we could just start offering human design to people. And like this is such a compelling offering. I like laugh at myself a little bit now because like the short story of that whole experience is that like he was an amazing teacher. We did build a business together. We were not able to make it financially sustainable. I actually quit human design in 2017. And like, so there's a whole other journey that happened after that. But how I ended up supporting myself is I did move to Bali. I Airbnb my apartment in New York City, and that's how I supported myself. And that's how kind of I supported myself beginning to study and learn. And then I moved back to New York City. He moved to New York with me, and then we kind of really gave it a shot, and bringing human design to individuals and companies. Of like it was an amazing journey that I look back on, and we just couldn't support ourselves. It was not a financially sustainable journey that we were on.
So Alan, the guy who created this, didn't have some sort of system in place for teaching teachers and helping people like monetize human design.
No, I think that like he had a really, there was a cool, like, there was a great education that my teacher gave me, and that also I went through kind of the traditional educational system that human design offered. But I will say that like I didn't always resonate with the way that it was taught, because human design, I feel like can be such an empowering tool in our lives. And sometimes some of the early teachers were a little bit more like definitive, like, if you're this, you have to do this. And it just like didn't feel incredibly empowering. And so
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of my role has been around translating it to a more mainstream audience and making it more accessible. But human design, I will just say, and I think it's important context. When I discovered human design in 2015, it was incredibly fringe. Nobody knew really what I was talking about. And human design has really grown in awareness in the past 10 years, particularly in the past 5, 6. But it was like no one had any idea what I was talking about. So like I've been very lucky in my business and life because like I discovered it early. And so I was able to kind of ride this wave and help create this wave of it reaching a broader audience. But that was like just not the reality of my first 4 or 5 years. And yeah, there was no real like support around how to build a business or make this make sense to people that had never heard of it, which was basically everyone.
So talk a little bit about the origin of human design in 1987, and then when you got involved, where was it at that time? You said it was fringe, but how many people are we talking that are out there advocating for human design?
So human design, the origin story is mystical, and I will just say that because I work with so many skeptics and corporate clients, and I feel like I always remind people that what matters to me is not whether human design is true, but whether it's useful. And so it was founded in 1987 by Ra Uhuruhu, who was previously Alan. He renamed himself, but he basically was walking home one night in Ibiza and had a very mystical experience where he heard a voice. And the voice basically said, it's time to work. And so for 8 days and 8 nights, he channeled the system, meaning he just received all this information. And then he spent the next 20 years building it out. And like, if you looked up a human design chart before, you'll see it's like so intricate. Like, while we can become experts in human design, like in some ways, like there's no such thing because it's so endless in the information it can offer. But he basically started teaching a small group and it started growing, and it was people that really resonated with him. But I will say, like, by the time I discovered it, so what was that, 30 years later, there was no one in my life that had heard of human design. I feel like I heard like whispers of it when I was like in Ibiza or Bali or Kauai, like people that were a little bit more kind of like, I guess, ahead on some of these like mystical trends and spiritual trends or systems or whatever. But I didn't know anyone in my life who'd heard of human design when I discovered it. And even I will say it was so new that like my company at the time, Richard and I were building a business focused on bringing human design to businesses. And we didn't even use the language of human design because nobody had any idea what I was talking about, what we were talking about, which I think made it harder. But now, it is, again, it's changed so dramatically.
Yeah, and just to go back to your point about mystical origins, like a lot of people would hear that, especially a lot of the sort of healthy skeptics and type A type of people, and just kind of dismiss it. Oh, well, that doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense. Meanwhile, the Bible has very similar origins. The book I mentioned, Conversations with God, the guy basically channeled it.
Yeah.
Same type of deal. So apparently, throughout human history, this has been
It
happening.
happens. Yeah.
People who are sort of tapped in to something,
Yeah.
some sort of source of knowledge, have been able uh, to channel not wisdom. And I loved your point about don't get caught up in if it's true. The real question is it useful? Does it resonate? Is it
Yeah.
helpful? Does it empower you? And these are the kinds of questions that I think we can apply to almost anything. There's useful truths within the Bible. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Let he who is not sinned cast the first stone. Like these are timeless, useful axioms that could apply in any culture with any person. And I think that's what we're talking about is principles. And so
Hmm.
those principles will stand the test of time. And I think if we cut ourselves off from being open to it, and I'm a healthy skeptic. I'm like your husband. Like I don't,
Hmm.
even with like meditation stuff, I don't just buy into everything just because some guru said it. I have to feel like it's resonant with my
Yeah.
own personal direct experience. And if so, then I'm all for it. But when you start asking about the origin story of certain sects of meditation, you end up with these really weird mystical origins, and it's just like, okay, I don't need to remember all these 8 syllable names of people who turn into mountains and snakes and da 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 da. But when I sit down and I close my eyes and I do the thing, I feel better afterward, and no one has to convince me it's not my imagination. I genuinely
Yeah.
feel a tangible sense of rest and expansion and whatnot. So,
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I feel like I feared early on. I was like, I'm like trying to bring this to companies, to all these people. Like I'm going to encounter so many skeptics, and like I have, but I also find the way that we present things makes such a difference. I feel like the more I've explored human design, which is very a long time now, a decade, I feel like the less dogmatic I've become. I very much present it as like, this is what human design says. Like, how does it feel? Does that feel useful? Does it feel supportive? And my experience is often the people that are the most skeptical are the ones that fall in love with it the most,
mm-hmm.
because they're just like, at the beginning, like, I don't know, this is so woo woo. And then, like, at a certain point, they're like, but it's so specific. And like, have you been following me around? And like, I'm also noticing it make tangible differences in my relationship with my partner and my kids. So, like, just tell me everything. But I do think it's important, or it has been for me, to present it from that lens because yeah, I think it's really easy to be like, what is this crazy thing telling me? But like when it's presented through a lens of like, does it feel useful? Does it feel supportive? And it's okay if it doesn't. I
Mm-hmm.
think it gives us so much more permission to just like be honest about if it actually feels resonant and supportive in our lives.
And you wrote a book called "How Do You Choose?" Um, a human design guide to what's best for you at work, in love, and in life.
Why are you
I'm
laughing?
chuckling because it sounds like something a publisher would say. This has to be the subtitle. It has to be apply to people's lives in the real world.
Yeah, I
So
know that
just
was actually us. But yeah, I
that
get
was you.
that. That was us. Yeah.
That's good because that's what you have. You have to make it relatable. You have to
Yeah.
kind of show people how this is going to be useful to them.
Yeah.
So, is this one of the first books? Is this the definitive book on human design? Um,
Oh my God, it's hilarious you asked that because there is a book written by the founder called The Definitive Book to Human Design. So it's not the definitive book, but I will say that it is definitely different than every other human design book out there because there are so many amazing human design books already, but they all serve as textbooks. They're for people like
mm,
me that are like, oh, I want to like go read about all the elements from someone else's perspective. So I find those books amazing. And yet what I was thinking about when I wrote this book and why I chose to write this book is that I felt like a more consumer friendly version was needed. I feel like most people don't want to learn human design. They want to know how to actually use it in their life to experience change, in
mhm.
their relationships, in their career. And so this book is very much written not for people that like want to learn every single intricacy of the chart, but rather people who want to know what it can do for them. Like, what does it actually say about how they can find more flow in their relationships? What does it say around how they can make better and easier decisions? What does it say about how they can structure their day to day? So you're right. The practicality was like front and center, but that was because I haven't seen anything like it that's existed. And I want people to actually come to this book, not only because they're interested in human design, but just because like they want to know like how they can make better decisions in their realm of career and relationships. And like, this is just one tool that can help them do that.
You kind of get right to it in the book. I mean, you spend a little bit of time on your personal story and how you come across this, but then we kind of dive right into the different, what do we call them?
Different
Categories?
types.
Different
Yeah.
types. Okay. So
Yeah.
you say this is kind of like if NASA's planetary data had a love child with the zodiac system, that would be human design.
Yeah.
Correct? A little
Yeah.
bit of
Yeah. I'm like,
maybe
wait, is
Lao
that
King
still?
was at the party, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It is. So I think what I always feel like with human design, what drew me so much to it is it's equal parts mystical and practical. It is
Mhm.
so mystical in that it comes from the stars, and like, we literally pull from the NASA, like, algorithm to create the chart on our website. And it's so practical. The information it gives us isn't actually very mystical in nature. It's very specific guidance around how we can, show up in a way that feels more authentic and aligned in our lives, and around decision making and strengths and challenges and all those things. So it is this interesting confluence that I think to me is really compelling.
So you and I did a reading. You did my reading
Yeah,
a few years ago during the pandemic, I believe.
I
And
think so.
you have a copy of it?
On Instagram. Oh, yeah, I have your chart up.
You have my chart up? Okay, cool. So I thought we could maybe tell the audience how it all works through looking at my chart and seeing what is it time specific. So if we did it say 3 years ago, does it only relate to whatever was going on 3 years ago, or is it kind of a thing that applies indefinitely?
It applies indefinitely. So human design is based on your time, date, and place of birth. So it is
Mm-hmm.
time specific, and like it's based on when you were born.
Mm-hmm.
But your design is, I'm looking at the same chart that I looked at 3 years ago. You might
Okay.
relate to it differently because you're probably a different person than you were then.
Mm-hmm.
But the chart and the kind of the mechanics of how you operate best in this world are the same.
Okay.
Okay, should we dive in?
Yeah, but before we dive in, so let's say somebody hears all this and wants to go and look up theirs. Is there a website where they do that?
Yeah.
Do you go to a certain link to get this information that we're about to go through?
Yes. So to look up your own chart, you can look it up at humandesignblueprint.com. And
Okay.
it's going to be this wild looking chart that probably is not going to make any sense at first. And yet it doesn't need to. You'll see kind of some qualities listed, and those are the pieces to kind of explore. And there are ways to do it both free, and you can also upgrade to kind of get deeper dives on the site as well.
Okay. So we've gone to this link. We've entered in my name, my birth time, right?
Hmm. And your
4:30 or whatever,
location.
and the location where I was born.
Hmm. And your name doesn't affect it. It's just the time, date, and place.
Okay.
So, what I would also say to anyone when I do a session with them or in general is like, take or leave it. If it feels useful, supportive, resonant, take it. If it doesn't, let it go. So, again, like I shared earlier, my goal here is not trying to convince you of anything. It's really just to offer a really interesting and new framework to think about how you operate best. So, human design is so specific and so personalized. So, I'll kind of talk about some of the most important pieces, but no, we're just skimming the surface here. I think where I would start is with your type, and the book dives deep into this. You are a manifesting generator in human design. It basically means that you are somebody that has like so much powerful energy and capacity to kind of build, create, make things happen. Like when you are lit up and excited, like your energy is boundless. It is also very infectious. You can really kind of light up the room of the people around you and really light up everybody. So it's really to everyone's benefit that you really prioritize the things that bring you the most fulfillment, the most satisfaction, and see that not as a selfish choice, but as the most generous thing you can do. But I think something that makes manifesting generators very distinct is that they tend to be quite multi-passionate and multidimensional. They tend to really like to do many different things, and they need freshness and variety and change. And where some people are really designed for like mastery, and obviously you are masterful, like you've really, mastered many things, meditation being one of them. But your design talks about kind of this need to kind of keep things new and fresh and ever changing. Does that feel true in your life?
100%. Yeah. I've never been able to lock in on just one thing, you know, forever. I've always had to have two or three or four or five or seven
Yeah.
different things. They have a little bit of an overlap, but they're all different ways of creating. And I have to have all those going. I've never been able to read just one book. I'm reading
Yeah.
like two or three books. Um, and I have a podcast, I have an online community, I have my meditation stuff, I have my keynote speaking, and I love all of it. I love the coaching, I love all of it, and I need all of it so that I can feel fresh when I come
Mm.
to any one thing. So that is 100% accurate.
Well, and
And there are
mm,
only like four types, right? But
five.
there are
Yeah.
overlaps. So
Yeah.
can you, before we get deeper into mine, can we just review the
Of
other
course.
types? Just
So
like
again,
maybe a
if
line about each one?
yeah, I love it. Yeah. And if you want to look up your design, again, you can go to humandesignblueprint.com to see what your type is listed as. So we got the manifesting generators, what we're talking about with light, kind of this multi-passionate, super energetic, like they thrive with that variety and freshness. We've also got generators. They're similar in many ways, also very powerful, capable, natural doers, but for them, they're a little bit more designed for like mastery. They might enjoy kind of diving into one thing, kind of enjoy the step-by-step process. My husband is a generator, and he does do many things, but for him, it's very much one at a time. It's like he just goes so deep, and then 3 months later, it's like, and the next thing. So it's quite different there. The projectors, I'm a projector in human design. Projectors are very natural leaders, guides, teachers, very wise about people, really good at asking the right questions, but our energy really ebbs and flows. Like for projectors, it's so much around kind of building space and rest and pause into our days and not trying to kind of do and keep up with kind of the superhuman doing of the people around us. We've got manifestors who are very disruptive people, very innovative people, people that are really good at like initiating and getting new ideas started. They are not here to do all the doing to keep an idea alive, but really kind of get it started. You've definitely got some qualities of this in your design too. These are people that often thrive with freedom to kind of do what they want, when they want, how they want. And then we've got reflectors, the rarest type. These people are kind of like our collective mirrors. They really take in everything in their environment and mirror it back. So it's so important for them to be such kind of ruthless curators of where they're spending time and who they're spending time, because they feel it all. And they just are very kind of wise, objective observers.
So everyone is
One of
one of
those.
those, or maybe a combination, kind of like me.
Yeah.
Does it matter which one comes first? You said manifest.
So you're a manifesting generator, which is its own distinct type, but it is the
There's no
only type that has
generating manifester.
no. But there is like, you're kind of the only one that's like kind of a little bit hybrid like in that way,
Mhm.
where it's like you've got all this boundless energy, but you also like can make things happen so quickly and so powerfully, like as soon as you're clear on what you want to do.
Mhm.
But that's kind of the only hybrid one. But that is one other piece that I would be curious how it resonates for you as a manifesting generator is, while it might take you some time to kind of reach clarity, and we'll talk about that in a moment, you are somebody that like once the clarity is there, you can make things happen very fast and very
Mhm.
powerfully. And something I've noticed in manifesting generators, I'm curious if it feels true for you, is sometimes they can be a little bit disappointed in like the comparatively low capacity of other people. And they can be like that others aren't doing as much or doing it as effectively or as powerfully. And like others aren't meant to, like they've got their own gifts. But I think that's one thing I often remind manifesting generators of, because they're disappointed to others, not because others are incompetent, but just because they're different. And I
Mhm.
feel like that's so much of the magic of human design, of like just understanding our differences so we can use them to kind of find our way back to each other and not make each other wrong for just being different.
That's interesting because I have to be honest. Before this conversation, I obviously thought about it, and in preparation, and I was just I was contemplating the usefulness of knowing these. And
Yeah.
as someone who works with a lot of other people, I can appreciate profound usefulness in understanding how other people may approach the work. Because you're
Yeah.
right, some people, if you try to get them to multitask, they do mediocre work with everything. But if you get them to lock in on just one thing, then they can do superior work. And so just having that understanding can be very helpful, I think, as a leader. Or when you have kids, and everyone who has kids knows that no
Yeah.
two kids, just because they come from the same two parents, are going to approach life in the same way or respond to challenges in the same way. And so it really helps to understand um, what someone's internal sort of gears are showing when it comes
Yeah.
to these kinds of types.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, my hope for the book is that people just not only read the chapters about themselves, but the chapters about the people closest to them. Because, like, I
Mhm.
will say, I'm married to somebody who's very different than me. And every time I read the chapter about generators and relationships, I like learn something new and I wrote the book. You know what I mean? And still I'm just like, God, I could do that better. Oh, I see why that was hard. Like it's just so revealing to really understand the differences. And like one kind of example I'll give, one story I tell in the book is of a generator father who I sat with. And when he came to me, he was like, Erin, I'm so frustrated with my daughter. Like she was a high schooler. And I was like, what's going on? He's like, well, she's like doing softball, she's doing lacrosse, she's like also running cross country, like she's running dance. Like I'm just like, all I want is for her to like lock in and choose a thing. Like that's how I did it. That's how it worked for me. And I looked up her design. I was like, oh, well, she's a manifesting generator. I was like, she's kind of doing it perfectly. Like she's meant to try things on and let things go. Like he was really designed for mastery and choosing that one thing. And like his daughter was not. And so what he perceived as flakiness was just her honoring her need for variety. And like, obviously, that is one story. And like, I have a bajillion of those stories. Like, even with my 6 month old, she's 6 months old. And already, like, I see her manifest her nature so clearly in a way that has given me so much permission and relief to just like allow her to be different than her sister.
That's interesting because there's so many type systems. Like,
Yeah.
there's the love languages. There's obviously the Myers Briggs. There's my friend Jonathan came up with this thing called Spark Types, which is about how you approach work. There's, and then just relationship, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and
Yeah.
four agreements. And so, where does human design fit within the ecosystem of types?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, I mean, I'm not going to say any are, bad. I feel like they're all really useful, and I feel like I've co-hosted retreats with like Enneagram people and astrologers, and like they all support each other so beautifully. And like, I think something that feels different to me about human design is like how specific it is. Like, we sell this thing called the Blueprint Guide. It's basically a hyper personalized guide to your unique design. And we don't even cover everything of that guide. There are 400,000 possible variations of that guide. Like that's very distinct, And so like I'm never really reading charts and be like, oh, you guys are the same. Like there's always a difference. I also feel like a thing, and I'd be curious your thoughts on this. I think what felt really useful and different to me about human design is that it didn't only give me all this really juicy information that made me feel seen, but it gave me all these like pretty immediately practical tools that I could like integrate into my day to day, into how to structure my day to day, into how to make decisions, and how to approach community. And I feel like with a lot of other systems, I feel really seen, and then I don't know what to do. I don't know what's next. And so I think the kind of the actual piece was so compelling to me, but I also feel like that might be available in a lot of other systems in a way that I just haven't explored yet.
Right. Okay, so let's make it real for people. Okay,
Okay.
let's. So I'm a manifesting generator. You're a
Hmm.
projector. You and
Yeah.
I are in a relationship or marriage or whatever.
Yeah.
What does that look like on a daily basis? Where do you have to kind of give me grace? Where do I need to give you grace when it comes to regular everyday relationship stuff?
Yeah. Great question. There's one story I tell in the book of a projector and manifesting generator couple. And when this projector came to me, she was like, felt so defeated because her husband was like, he was like running multiple like marathons and he had like multiple companies. And she was just like, I cannot keep up with him. And I feel like I am not enough as a person. And I feel like I'm not showing up for our family. Like, I don't think this is sustainable anymore. And so, like, when we sat together, it was so interesting because I think in a moment like that, where they were struggling is that he wanted her to do as much. He wanted her to keep up with her, like with all the activities, and it was burning her out. And so, what he needed to learn was like she needed a level of rest and space and time alone from him and their kids that he didn't require. Not true for everybody, like there's a lot of nuances here around our type. But for her, like he really needed to kind of give her that space and not perceive that as like lazy or her not showing up, but like the restoration she needed. And I think also like it was important for him to recognize that her gift was not just how much she could like show up to every single activity. Like when he sat back and thought about it, like she was the one that offered like the behind the scenes guidance and wisdom that like really shaped every direction that he took. So like that's where he learned to give her spaces. Like she needs rest, she needs time alone, she needs space, she needs invitations. And I think one lesson for her in terms of how to best support him, so this would be me best supporting you, is that manifesting generators are so capable that they can get like kind of burdened with carrying everything themselves. And so really kind of not expecting him or you to kind of do everything and handle everything just because you can, just because you're capable. I see this with my husband so much, and really kind of doing my best to give you space to kind of like do the things that like light you up and excite you just because, not because you're accomplishing a thing or because it's productive, but like just because you really enjoy it. And know that when you have space to do those things, like you'll come back with so much more energy, and that will power up everybody around you. One example I'll give from the book is there was another manifesting generator in a couple who ended up building a shed in his backyard. So every day he would like retreat to his shed and just like do woodworking and kind of do this thing that really excited him. And then he would like come back really rejuvenated. So like having that space to kind of be in his own flow and create in that way was so important. And it was so important for his partner to kind of not see that as unnecessary or superfluous, but really as a pretty essential ingredient to their relationship.
If you're tired of trying to change, but you fall off the wagon and start over and repeat that process every few months, my latest book, The Year You Transform, can be your guide to adopting the most sustainable path to transformation. With 10 powerful 7-day challenges and a proven roadmap, this book will give you all the tools you need to transform one small win at a time. Get your copy at theyearyoutransform.com. Is there a distinction when it comes to these categories between the masculine and the feminine? Because, the way our brains work, the way we process information can be a little bit different.
Yeah. I haven't seen it in a consistent way, no. Like it does show up in different ways, and that manifestors are a certain type, and a piece that we haven't talked about is like manifestors are here to initiate, they're here to make the first move. So sometimes when I talk to women, they're like, oh, I really have been conditioned against that, and what does it really mean to make the first move? And yet when they reflect on their relationships, they often begun by them making the first move. So I think that it can show up differently for men and women, but I haven't seen any kind of consistent through lines of what that looks like, or even like types being men or women being, different kind of percentages.
Let's do one more example just for the people. Let's say a reflector woman is married to a generator man.
Okay. Well, I tell a story in the book of a very similar one. The is a reflector man and generator woman, but I'll switch it just for the context of the story. So the example here was around decision making. So again, we're just touching on these things, but the generator in the partnership was, and this is not true for all generators, but it's true for about half of them, is they're kind of meant to make decisions very instantaneously in the moment. It's like a gut feeling. These are very gut driven people. Generators are, so are manifesting generators. Mm-hmm. So when they came to me, they were trying to decide whether or not to move to the East Coast. And this generator had in the moment clarity and immediately knew that he wanted to go to the East Coast. It was so clear. And yet reflectors are meant to give themselves a lot more time to make decisions, ideally a full month. And so when they came to me, I know, a little bit incomprehensible for people that are not wired that way, but when they came to me, he was feeling really frustrated with his partner because he perceived her as waffling, as kind of just like really not choosing, as kind of pushing the decision off. And yet what he perceived as waffling was like her just doing her thing, like talking things out, exploring all the possibilities, kind of sampling the different options. And eventually she would reach clarity, as she always did, probably in about a month. And so it was so interesting in that moment because they just made decisions differently. Mm-hmm. And that interpretation of like, he can't decide was like, they just don't know yet. So that's a big piece for reflectors, is they often need a lot of space in relationships to kind of reach clarity on their own time and not be rushed into decisions faster than they want to be.
Do certain types, you know how they do that? There's the ancients, there's the attachment theory and all of that. Do opposites attract, or can certain types be in a relationship with each other, or how does it usually look in the field?
Yeah, great question. I think that I would say my perspective more generally is that human design is not meant to limit who we can partner with. It just lets us know how we can best be with the people that we choose. I would say that we are often very attracted to people that are similar to us. I would say personally that often manifests in friendship. I have a lot of projector friends. I think that there's something very sometimes easeful about being with people of similar designs in certain ways, because you're just like, there's this similarity and we can learn these lessons together. But I do think, to your point, we are often very attracted to difference, and so my husband, like I said, his design is opposite mine in every single way. So I would say many romantic partners tend to be quite different. And that can be really, really hard if you try to be the same. Mm-hmm. But I think when you appreciate how different you are, it's amazing. That former business partner, my first teacher, was a manifesting generator like you. And that was what made it so great, was that we were just so different and we brought such different things to the table. So there's no good or bad here, but I do think that the difference can be so amazing when you stop trying to be the same.
All right. So let's talk about me some more. All right. We talked about my type. Now we have to get into strategy, right?
Let's talk about your strategy. Yes. So this is true for all generators and manifesting generators. You are somebody that's not really meant to kind of come up with your next step out of thin air. Some people are meant to just kind of initiate and see what bubbles up within them. You are meant to just see what shows up in your world and what naturally pulls you towards it. That might be at a gathering, you see someone across the room and you're like, I have to talk to them. That could be you listen to a podcast or read a book and you're like, oh, I want to create an offering around that. It could be meditation showing up in your world and you're like, I just feel inexplicably pulled to that. But you're basically here to just see what sparks your gut response and kind of what shows up in your world, and kind of let that guide your next direction, even if it's super unexpected. I'm curious how and if this lands and like how it, yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
before I tell you that, can you tell me what the alternatives are? Like, just go over
Yeah,
the other three so I can understand if
of
that's
course.
one that's
So,
for me.
yeah. So the other ones are some people like me are meant to be invited into things
Hmm.
where it's really about somebody being like, and think about how I was introduced to human design. It was like I met a stranger who was like, you are meant to do this. Like that is how so many opportunities have really unfolded in my life. Manifestors, that's for projectors. Manifestors are meant to initiate. So for them, it's basically not waiting for some external thing to kind of spark your gut response, which is about you. It's around like they're just like alone doing their own thing, and this kind of just like urge will arise out of nowhere, and then they're just here to follow it. So they're here to kind of initiate. They need no like external confirmation or external cue. And the final one is for reflectors. And for reflectors, and honestly, there's a little bit of an element for you in this as well, but it's about just like being in the right space. When they're just like in a space that feels good, like a cafe or a co working space or a city, like that's when kind of opportunities arise. So it's about planting themselves in spaces that feel good and kind of seeing what opportunities show up in that space.
Mm. So I would say you're two for two. I do find myself getting drawn to things, and this is one of the reasons why I love all the things that I'm doing,
Yeah.
because it puts me in these different environments, and even in environments where I don't really love, I can always find something that I'm drawn to, something that's useful, whether it's a person, a conversation, or just whether it's observing something that I find fascinating,
Yeah.
and then it'll get my wheels turning around how I can borrow that or implement something that I'm witnessing in a place that I really don't like very much. But I'm like, wow, the way that street musician is presenting themselves is really interesting. I could do a little bit more of that in my website,
Yes.
that kind of thing. And just get this
Well,
inspiration from everywhere.
Well, I love that example because I've talked to a number of people this week that share this strategy, and they've talked about like how hard it is when they try to create content when they're like at home and they're just like try to come up with it out of nowhere and it's not coming. And then they kind of
Mhm.
just go give themselves more inputs and they're like this and then this and then this. So it's like it's so smart, I think, for these people to be very proactive about widening the inputs to kind of see what it naturally generates within you. And again, I love how unexpected it is. I can't tell you how often I've sat with clients that are like, I ended up doing this thing. Like, I never thought I would pursue this path or date this person. And yet, like, there was just an undeniable tug that I like had to follow.
Mm. So let's do another example. Let's say you're in business, you're a projector in business with a reflector. How would you all approach from a strategy perspective? How would you
Mm,
approach needing to raise money?
mm. Great question. I would say that, like, one thing I've had to really learn as a projector is that my work is to really make myself visible. Like often the invitations don't come if like people don't know I exist, obviously.
Mhm.
And so like I think my work in building a business has been very much around like how can I just share authentically and like, on Instagram and newsletters and podcasts and kind of see what comes from that. And so I would say if you are a projector and reflector building a business, like you might have to make yourself visible and kind of like reach out to friends and you might even have to reach out to, VCs or whatever, because like they have to know that you exist. I think it might be more useful to kind of reach out to community and see what they can create for you. But before saying yes, I would make sure that you feel so invited in and so recognized and so seen by the people that you're working with. Where it's like, yes, you maybe had to put yourself out there in ways that didn't always feel natural, but I would not say yes until you're like, they just see it, they get it, like in a way that feels very deep. And I'll give one example from my own life, which is not about raising money, but which is about selling this book. I think that I wanted to write a book for a long time, but it never really felt like the right time. And there was an agent that kind of kept reaching out. And by the time that it came, I was like, I've got to write a book. I was going to go pitch the agent that my husband worked with. And then I was like, why am I pitching this agent when this person who already reached out like gets it so clearly? And so I ended up working with her. And then I ended up, as you know, like talking to a bunch of publishers, but there was one publisher that had reached out 5 months before I started writing a book. And she had been like, Erin, are you writing a book? You should write a book. And like, I just was like, loved this woman over email. I was like, I'm obsessed with her. Like she basically was inviting me into writing a book. And then when I met with 8 publishers, and meeting with her was just different. And then we got the offers, and like she was just different. And she was the one that had like invited me and had like seen me so clearly. And like, so it's like, I feel like even when I try to put myself out there in all the ways, there's always one person that just like, I feel like I don't have to convince. They just see the value very clearly and it feels so organic. And like, that's how things kind of unfold in my life. So like, you might pitch a lot of venture people, you might whatever, but there might just be one or two that you're like, they just get it. Like, and that's kind of the invitation that you're looking for. Does that help?
Yeah. What about the Reflector? How would they deal with raising money as your partner?
Yeah, I think that for them, it's really about being in the right space. Like if they're to be proactive about raising money, like I would actually think about what are the spaces they feel the most drawn to. Are there co-working spaces? Are there online communities? Are there, cafes? And I would actually just start there and
So
see
don't
what
have the
comes.
conversation in a fast food restaurant. Take them to the terrace of the Soho House in West Hollywood where they can overlook the whole
Yes.
Pacific Basin.
Well, no, I'm so glad you say that because it is about, yes, opportunities arising in the right space, but also you never stop honoring that sensitivity. It's like you're meeting with an investor, like choose the place. Like if you're
Mm,
going on a date, choose the place. Like the experience is so different when they're really in a space that feels right to them. So I would really use that sensitivity to space as kind of a compass in that journey. And I actually want to use
mm,
you as an example because you're not a reflector. However, in your design, you are meant to be incredibly sensitive to your physical space. So you're
mhm.
meant to be a little bit high maintenance and meticulous about your space. And I mean it in the big ways of like choosing where to live. I also mean it in the small ways of like going on a date and being like, I don't like this table. I'd like to move. This hotel doesn't feel right. I'm going to book another one. And so
Mhm.
like in your design, it's actually true for you. It's like on a different scale for reflectors, but I'm curious, like, do you feel that?
100%. Yeah. I don't have any qualms about changing spaces, leaving a place, walking out of a movie if it's off, just anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's like it for reflectors.
Leaving
Like
a
that's kind of the journey.
conversation that just people start gossiping. And I'm just, okay, guys, I got to go,
Yeah.
100%.
Well, you feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think there's something really cool for reflectors that like because they amplify the energy that they're around, I feel like they can really consider like what is the energy I want to amplify?
Hmm.
If I want to explore entrepreneurship, how can I spend time with more entrepreneurs? If I want to explore my artistic side, how can I like be in more artistic spaces? So like they can kind of use that sensitivity that they so naturally carry to guide where they put their energy next.
Hey, really quickly, if you like this content or if you don't like it, let me know down in the comments because your likes and comments are going to help me learn what you want more of. And then that way, I can keep bringing you the good stuff. All right. Thanks so much for your feedback and back to the show. Okay. And then one more example for strategy. If you are a
Manifest.
generator
Yeah.
and a manifester, and you guys are talking about social media strategy and how to like get that going. What's
I
the
like it.
conversation?
Okay. So to support the
This is like
generator,
influence. Have you read Influence by Robert
no.
Cialdini? Yeah, he talks about ways of influencing humans using human behavior, not in a manipulative way, but just
Yeah.
understanding how humans think about things. Kind of like the Hare Krishnas, they give you the free flower or candy so that you pay more attention to them when they're going to try to sell you on Hare Krishna. They're not giving it to you just out of the kindness of their heart. It's
Right.
an exchange. So anyway, go ahead.
No, I love it, but I do think
Manifestor
there's
generator.
yeah, I think that there's something really powerful about like knowing how to communicate with somebody in a way that like you can get through to them and it can really land. And so here's what I say about generators. And this will extend to manifesting generators too. They're also here to respond to things. And so it can be really easy for them to be like, I've got to create this thing when like they actually have no natural response. Their gut's not pulling them in that direction. So I would say one of the ways the manifestor can best support them is by giving them things to respond to. And what I mean by that is like asking them really specific questions, being like, hey, are you more excited to share about this or this? Do you want to do this platform or this one? Like when you give them things to respond to, it kind of generates that natural response. I'm going to use you as an example. If you're going out to dinner with somebody and you can again say this doesn't resonate, like it might feel easier instead of somebody being like, where do you want to go? Being like, do you want to go here or here? Do you want to eat this or this? The answer might be neither, but generators and manifesting generators tend to love specific yes, no things because it bypasses the mind and it gets them straight into like the visceral, like that feels right and that doesn't. And I don't have to think about it.
100%. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I do that all the time. I give people two options or three options
Yeah.
just to
Exactly.
save time. It's not because I'm open to go anywhere, but just
Yeah.
I'm more flexible. Well, that's not true. If I'm with someone whose taste I trust, then I'm like, yeah, you choose the place. I'll meet you
Yeah.
there. But if I don't know your taste, then I'll give you a couple of options and
Yeah.
sell you one of those options and ask you to choose.
Yeah, and
But I'm
I
happy
it's
with either.
yeah. Well, yeah, and it's just like it's often a way. It's so interesting because I feel like with generators, often they'll like even be in session with me and they'll kind of talk about a decision for a while, and then I'll be like, "But do you want to do it?" They're like, "No." Like so, it's like they can go in all the directions, but like when they're posed a very specific question, the answer is actually incredibly clear. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's real value in knowing how to communicate to kind of draw that truth out of them. I would say for manifestors, when it comes to, I think social was the question, or social media or
Mm-hmm.
sharing,
Mm-hmm.
manifestors are like they're here to like be so inspired and so on fire for like a real burst of time, and then they kind of like have to pull back and be alone. And so I would actually say that a lot of inspiration for manifestors probably comes when they have space to be in their own energy, and kind of it just naturally comes. So I would kind of build a working dynamic where they like feel that freedom to kind of go do their own thing and like let it come, and they can come be on fire. And socially it might mean that like they might have 3 weeks where they're just like blowing it out of the water. They're so amazing. And then like have 3 weeks where they're really quiet. And
Mm-hmm.
so really kind of building a structure that allows that. I would also say that manifestors tend to not love being pestered with questions. So, just kind of like keeping them in the loop without forcing them to kind of answer all these things on the spot is
Mm-hmm.
probably going to feel more natural for them.
And then how do generators approach that situation?
So generators, like just giving them specific questions, giving them things to respond to is
Okay.
really, and kind of just seeing what they like, what naturally sparks. And so like, and if like nothing's naturally sparking within them, kind of encouraging them to kind of go out in the world and get different inputs, like you, the
So
same.
with social media, do you want to do blue or orange? What do you want the theme to be? Blue or orange?
That's
You
right.
don't say you don't just give them the whole color palette and say choose a color that you like. That's
Yeah.
too.
Let me give you an example. I was doing a podcast earlier this week with somebody, and they were trying to figure out like a brand, like the colors for this new launch.
Mhm.
And they like asked her, this generator, what color she wanted. And she's like, I have no idea. And then she looked at her water bottle and she saw like the most beautiful forest green. And she was like, I want that color. Like she needed a thing to respond to. And she saw this water bottle right in front of her. And it was just like so clear. And so just
Mhm.
like giving them things to respond to. And it might take a while, but that's kind of what sparks that feeling of like, oh, that's it.
Who's more prone to change their mind, and who's less prone to change their mind, or least prone to change their mind when they come up with a decision?
Well, it depends on how they're making decisions. The piece of the chart that we haven't talked about from the book is the authority, which is how you make
Well, that's what we're going to
decisions.
go to next anyway. So let's go back to me then. We'll talk about
Okay,
the
it's good.
authority, and then we'll talk
Okay,
about decision making.
because it's a great question. So the authority is the piece that speaks to how we make decisions. It goes beyond type. Like you and I have the same authority, even though we're different types.
Hmm.
So for you, and again, take it or leave it, like you're somebody who's got a very instinctual gut feeling about things. Like we talked about this kind of like this visceral pull or this kind of push away. And you're meant to trust it for all the small daily decisions, where to go, who to spend time with. But for the big decisions in your life, what your design actually says is that you are not meant to make decisions in the moment or in a very kind of rash, spontaneous way. Many people are meant to do this, but you're meant to like give yourself a beat, like see how
Hmm.
the decision feels the next day or the day after, and basically see like if that excitement sustains,
Hmm.
and kind of making a decision not from like a pressured place or a hurried place or even a very emotional place, but from like a very cool, calm, and settled place within you, which like you are cool, calm, and settled from the outside. But like I know as somebody with this authority, I so often would make decisions in the moment in my life, like in a fit of inspiration. And then I
Hmm.
would wake up the next day and I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, why in the world did I commit? And so for me, I've learned that like taking more time at the outset means that I change my mind a lot less because I
Mm.
like give myself the space to really kind of land in what feels right. This is not true for everybody, but I'm curious how this lands, if at all, for you.
Again, you're 3 for 3, 100%. I can make a decision in the moment if I really
Yeah.
have to, but even with like getting airline tickets, I'll spend hours and hours like
Me too.
obsessing over every little detail,
Yeah.
thinking about like, okay, this flight is going to be at 2 in the afternoon. I got to be at the airport by 1. So when am I going to have lunch? But then it lands at 6, but there's going to be traffic. So I'm not going to have dinner till like 8:30. So I just have all these, I have like a million different considerations, and then I'll sleep on it. And then I'll think about maybe another airport I can fly into, and that they have free Wi-Fi. It's a direct flight, all these kinds of considerations. I can never let somebody choose my airlines for me unless that was their full-time job. And that's all they did was go through those different considerations. But I love to take my time with making big decisions. Small decisions I can make all day
Yeah, of
long.
course.
Big
Yeah.
decisions, um, such as being stuck in the air for hours on end. I like to take my time with that.
Yeah. And again, this is just a really good reminder of how useful it is to not only understand your own designs, but the designs of the people around you.
Hmm.
Because like you might be working closely with somebody who's really fast, and
Hmm.
there are a lot of authorities that are like super fast, super spontaneous. So they might actually change their mind a little bit more often because they are kind of quickly pivoting, but they've often been made to feel like they're too impulsive when like they're meant to be that speedy. So it's
Hmm.
just really useful to be like, how are we each meant to enter into things and how can we honor ourselves and honor each other?
And there's not really, you can't like police somebody's authority, right? Like they are the way they are. Your point is you just want to understand it so that you don't personalize it, you don't get offended by
Yeah.
it. You're just kind of holding space for it as much as you would want them to hold space for the way you approach these things.
That's right. And I also think that like it's worth waiting for somebody to reach a full-bodied yes in whatever form it takes for them, even if they arrive to it in a different way than you. Like one story that I share in the book that I loved was like some people reach clarity by talking things out. And one person shared she was married to somebody with this authority. And so even though she knew instantaneously, she made it a practice every day after work to go for like this long walk with her husband where he would basically just like talk through everything that he'd been processing that day. And like sometimes he would like get to the end of the loop and be like, I need to take another one. Like I haven't landed yet. And like I just love that example because she didn't need it, but he did. And
Mm.
so there wasn't this like, why aren't you getting there faster? It was like, I know you need this. And like, I'm just going to make sure that like I'm a really good person in your life to help you support you in reaching clarity.
Yeah, that brings up, I have a friend who he falls into these like loops, these mental loops around decisions that he's made, and it's hard for him to decide when he often decides it's not the best decision in my own estimation. And I'm always thinking to myself when I'm talking to him is just make a fucking decision. Like, why do we have to keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it? But now I'm realizing that that just may be a part of his type slash strategy slash authority.
Or he might be somebody who's really fast. And if you're just like, do you want to do it? He's like, no, so it
Mhm.
would be so interesting to see what it is because there is another part of us that sometimes people that are meant to be very fast end up kind of getting really in their head and mulling over things and talking about all the possibilities when like their body actually knows they just haven't been asked the right question or been able to access it.
All said, what I'm getting from this is just not taking things personally and just understand, okay, this is, that's kind of how he does things. And he doesn't
Yeah,
have to think about it in the same way that I think about it. I think that's a
that's right.
major like relationship challenge for people and friendship challenge. People will break up with friends and partners because either they don't like the decisions or they feel like they're too impulsive, as you said,
Yeah.
and thinking that, um, that's not supposed to be happening. And what I'm hearing you suggest is that this is like what you said, reflectors are the most rare. Are there percentages out of the people that you've worked with? Is it kind of
Hmm.
even with?
No. So generators and manifesting generators actually make up about 70% of people collectively. And then
Oh, so I'm not that
projectors.
unique.
No, 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 no. I feel like people say that. And it's just a good reminder that, like, again, this is type is the first piece, and then kind of there are so many layers underneath
Mhm.
that make you so unique. But then projectors are about 20%, manifestors about 8 to 9, and reflectors 1.
Why is reflector so rare? Like, what is that about? I wonder.
I would say that like my hypothesis is like reflectors, like they are like the objective assessors. Like they like come into a community, a space, a society. They kind of like feel it all and then kind of reflect back what they see in a way that can really enable progress. I don't think we need a ton of reflectors in every space. You really need one, so
Mhm.
they kind of like are these amazing seers in some ways and these evaluators where like I feel like it's more around kind of like one in each important space. So that's my perspective is like you don't need everybody doing that, but you need one really amazing person doing that.
And what's the best way to, if you're in a disagreement slash argument slash conflict with one of the other types, can you just give us a snapshot of the best way to resolve conflict with each
Hmm.
of the four types?
Totally. Yeah. And again, there are probably pieces here that are going to go way beyond type that could shed even more light on it. But I would say for Reflector, like probably giving them a little bit of space and time,
Mm-hmm.
because like they just like really need to feel into things, and they need to kind of be away from others and be with other people. And so you might find that they kind of can get intense in a moment when like they just need a little bit of a moment to settle. So I would give them a little
You
bit of,
have to reassure them, I'm giving you space, or you just give them space. You just stop talking and just.
I think it's probably appropriate to be like, maybe we take a little space, you know? But I think even having that conversation before things get heightened, to be like, this is the moment where things are intense and like it's a good moment to separate. I would say for projectors, like really feeling recognized and appreciated and like invited in. So I think it's really hard for me in arguments when I feel really unseen. When I feel like
Mhm.
I'm like saying a thing and I'm like, you don't get what I'm saying. You don't get where I'm coming from. So like I think that where I, again, space is always helpful, I think, for all of us. But I think it's really helpful for me to have somebody like acknowledge what they're hearing and what I'm saying and what they're seeing, for me to kind of have that affirmation, be like, okay, you get it. Let's keep going. You might disagree, but you get where I'm coming from.
Mhm.
That's what comes up for me. I think that like, gosh, again, there are so many pieces here beyond the type. For generators and manifesting generators, like I guess one thing that I would say, and I don't know whether this has come up for you, is like because they can so easily get caught in holding so much for so many people because they're so capable. I feel like there's something in arguments around like making sure their energy feels respected. Like their
Mm.
yeses are respected, their boundaries are respected, their no's are respected. Like it's not like they're just like, I'm carrying it all and like I'm just here doing it for everyone. It's just like it's like feeling like you really care about my energy and how I'm using it, because you know that even though there's a lot of it, it's still finite, and you respect me.
Mhm.
That's what comes up. How does that feel to you?
Yeah, going back to my buddy, who's always kind of caught in these loops. He'll ask me, what do you think? And I'll tell him what I think, and then he won't do anything with that. And I'm just like, why did you ask me what I think if you don't
Yeah.
honor what I think? And it does feel a little bit, I don't know if disrespectful is the word, but it doesn't inspire me to want to keep giving him my
Yeah.
my thoughts. So then I just understand, okay, he just needs a soundboard. He just needs someone to kind of talk things over with.
Yeah. And like, and again, say that this was his authority, like indeed that he needs to talk things out.
Mhm.
He needs to talk things out. One of the tools I always recommend to those people is really articulating to others that like, I'm not looking for advice. I'm
Mhm.
not looking for an opinion. I'm just need space to kind of speak things aloud and see how it feels when I say it aloud. And so it can be useful because then in moments like that, it's like, oh, like I know the role that I'm here to play. And like, I'm not going to, I don't want to say waste, but kind of like expend this energy that I have that is really precious in ways that are not going to be useful for me and actually can be tiring for me.
Mhm. Cool. So, for people who resonate with this system and they want to go further, is your book a gateway to like all of the human design practitioners in the world, or how does it actually work? Are there 1,000 people out there who can read further or deeper, or should people reach out to you specifically to
Yeah.
unpack whatever is going on beneath the surface?
It is grown. I am for sure not the only person doing it. I would say
Are you leading trainings? Do you teach other people
I
this stuff?
do. I do teach other. I know I've had over I think 1,200 people who now have been
Wow.
taught by me that are now sharing human design, which is pretty cool. But I would say that the book is really for you if you're like, I want to know what this system can help me with. Like, I
Hmm.
want to know how it actually can impact my career, my relationships, my decision making. Like, it's very much for you in that way. Um, and then also, we sell these guides, like I talked about, which are, totally unique to you. So if you're also just like, I want to like understand all these pieces of my chart and what it actually means, you can get those guides on humandesignblueprint.com with the discount code LIGHT. And then I also offer coaching and certification and things like that. But I think that like, yeah, there's so many beautiful places to learn human design, but I think that it's such a cool tool that often gives us permission to just like do each part of our life in a way that feels really authentic to us. And so if you feel like any kind of tug, I would definitely encourage you to explore it.
Wait, so give us the URL one more time, please.
Humandesignblueprint.com.
Humandesignblueprint.com, and the discount code is LIGHT,
Light.
LIGHT. Cool. What kind of discount are we talking about?
At 10%.
Perfect, though. All right. And your book is going to be available when?
It's going to be available. It comes out May 13th.
Okay. How Do You Choose is the book. Are you doing the audiobook and all that good stuff?
I've recorded it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
It's a
know.
crazy couple days, right?
It is. I've recorded a course for like a week, so like I was somewhat familiar, but it's really so hard.
Hmm.
I'm just really curious how it's gonna. It's a lot to read.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
like 16 hours I saw.
no.
How long is the book? The
It says
audiobook.
16 hours?
I think
No,
so,
there's
yeah.
no way.
I could
No,
be
no, no.
wrong. Maybe it was
I think
16 days. No. Yeah, it was 16 hours, I think.
I feel like that maybe is like an audible error. Like it's I my guess. I mean, I
How many
recorded it on a
pages? How many pages is the book? I'll tell you.
270.
Okay.
That means it should be like 5 or 6 hours. I'm also a
Yeah, it's
very
gonna be
fast
like
talker.
6 to 8 hours then.
6 to 8 hours.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean,
Cool.
16 would be crazy. I definitely wrote 16 hours, and as you probably know, as an author, none of those.
Mhm.
I eliminated all those pages, so it's yeah, it's been cut down, of course.
And final question, who did you write this book for? And I mean specifically, who did you have in mind when you were phrasing things in a certain way and including things and excluding certain things? Did you have like your husband in mind, or was there somebody more like you? Or
Yeah. I think, I mean, honestly, it's hard. I think that, like, I feel like people come in with all these questions. Like, what do I do next? What job should I take? How should I, like, communicate to this partner? And I feel like I've been able to sit with 4,000 people in sessions over the past many years. And I feel like I wrote it for all the people that I sit with that, like, have these questions, but need that constant guide of like, but how am I wired to do things? So like I just kind of wrote it as like a pocketbook for them, because I do find the people that come to me for sessions are not actually the people that come to me as students. They're the
Mhm.
people that come to me that are just like, I have this thing in my life and I want clarity. Help me. And so
Mm.
I wrote it for them. But like, it's interesting. I feel like human design is more mainstream than it once was, but it's still nascent. And so
Mhm.
I also wrote this book to help us, hopefully, cross the chasm to kind of reach the people that just like want to find more clarity in their lives, and they're open to any tool that will get them there.
Beautiful. Well, congratulations again on
Thank you.
this amazing book, and thanks for all of the workshopping you did with me. I think that's very helpful for a lot of people. It certainly is helpful for me.
Yeah.
And by the way, you're a mom of two,
Yeah.
your wife, your
Mm.
sister.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not some like woo woo person who's out there, living on a commune somewhere who doesn't have any
No.
responsibilities here.
I mean, we paused our recording so I could breastfeed.
And you're processing
Yeah.
exactly. So this is very much grounded in like real world, real life, kitchen table stuff.
Mm. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you resonated with this conversation and you want more, start by checking out this one. And otherwise, we've got an entire playlist of similar conversations. So make sure you're subscribed and please leave a comment letting me know which other guests you'd like for me to interview on this channel.